Now, let me address the elephant in the room. Just in case you think it is a disposable fashion watch, well, it is actually not. This chronograph is made by Swatch Group, yes, the same Swiss company that produces Hamilton watches, Tissot and Omega watches, to name a few. So, in theory, we shouldn't see any quality compromises on this proudly Swiss-made timepiece, and yet this can be found online for well under $100. Why is that? Well, I bought one and we've got it here. So, let's find out. Hello and welcome back. Yes, we do buy really weird timepieces sometimes, saving you the hassle. So do join us by hitting that subscribe button over there so you don't miss anything. Calvin Klein is, of course, a well-known fashion brand, yes, and even though they are not particularly known for their wristwatches, Calvin Klein has been in collaboration with Swatch Group since 1997, that is, until 2019, when they announced that they will be ending their partnership after 22 years. Swatch Group indicated at the time that there will be an 18-month transition period. The reason cited by Swatch Group, and I quote, due to the recent turbulence and uncertainties at the management level of Calvin Klein Incorporated New York, which went at the time through a series of organizational changes. Well, one way or another, Swatch Group stopped producing Calvin Klein branded wristwatches, and what we have here is a slice of history to some degree. The thing is that it looks like Swatch Group produced so many of those watches that more than 3 years later, these watches can still be found online, brand new of course, for a very competitive price. For example, I bought this one from Joma Shop for around $65, and while they are out of stock for this particular model, there are plenty of other Swiss-made Calvin Klein watches still available, and they are really competitively priced. And similar models, including this Chrono, can be also found online in other online shops. One thing to keep in mind is that originally this chronograph, for example, was selling for around $320 so the price that we see now is most likely a result of retailers trying to get rid of backlog stock rather than reflection of the actual quality of these watches. So yes, you can potentially score a bargain here. Right, packaging. Packaging, well, it's very straightforward, a robust box, feels like a very sturdy cardboard, a watch on a cushion and a user manual. Or at least this is what I've got when I bought this watch from the Joma Shop. Dimensions. Well, the first thing I've noticed about this watch was the quality of finishing. It is actually very good. However, the next thing I've noticed was the size of this watch. It is quite a prominent timepiece, and I was actually wondering if Calvin Klein and Swatch Group managed to pull off kind of the same trick as Seiko does sometimes, where they can make a really large watch wear really well even on the smallest of wrists. So the case width is 42.7 millimeters. To keep things in proportion, we get 22 millimeter lugs here. The case height is 12.9 millimeters, which is not bad and should help with making this watch more comfortable on the wrist. One of more important measurements when it comes to how this watch wears is the lug-to-lug distance, and it is measured by the lug tips about 49.5 millimeters. This is kind of promising. I can usually wear up to about 52mm lug-to-lug distance on my about 7-inch wrist. Still, due to its cushion-shaped case, this chronograph is quite prominent. Well, we will see how it wears when I do wrist shots later in the video. The supplied leather strap will cover up to about 8.25-inch wrist or up to about 21 centimeters, and on the supplied leather strap, this watch weighs 109 grams. Case. We have a full stainless steel construction here with a very fine satin brushing on top of the case and mirror-polished flanks. We have brushed bevels on the sides, giving this case a cushion-type shape for more wrist comfort. And the rest of the case is mirror polished, including the bezel, lug tips and the back of the case. As I mentioned earlier, the finishing of the case is actually quite good. Clearly a hallmark of Swatch Group attention to quality and detail. We have a signed crown, which is also mirror polished. The crown is well proportioned and is easy to operate. It is a push-pull crown, as we often see on chronographs. The piston-shaped chronograph pushers are also proportioned and feel sturdy and tactile when engaged. I like how flat is the back of the case, makes this watch quite comfortable on the wrist. However, I would prefer lugs to turn down a bit more. We can see that the back case sits nice and flat and actually slightly curved around my about 7-inch wrist. However, the top of the lugs are sculpted to look more flat. Looks like it was a conscious design decision to keep the lugs flat and prominent. So, to answer my earlier question, if this watch wears like a large Seiko, well, not quite. As a matter of fact, we get rather a Panerai style look. That is, it is a large watch and has a strong presence on the wrist. Here is a Panerai homage from Steel Dive that I reviewed recently for comparison. I will leave a link to the review of this Steel Dive in the description. So, if a big prominent Panerai-like wrist presence is your thing, then this watch could be an option. Continuing to the back of the case, it looks like we have a snap-on back case, which makes sense for a Swiss-made watch, which is not a diver at this price point. We have 50 meters of water resistance declared on this watch, which is okay for a racing chronograph. Well, if you all of a sudden require more than 50 meters of water resistance while driving a car, I guess something went really wrong and timing your speed wouldn't be your first priority. Dial. I like the dial color combination of black and yellow with red accents. The hour indices are partially applied with lume in the middle and mirror polished rectangles on the sides. I also like the date window at 4 o'clock position. It is very subtle and useful at the same time. We have a tachometer scale running by the perimeter of the dial. The black background of the dial actually has a very subtle sunburst effect. The markings on the dial are kept to a minimum, Calvin Klein branding on top and Swiss-made at the bottom. The subdial at 6 o'clock is a running seconds indicator, and the other two subdials at 2 and 10 o'clock are used by the chronograph. The 2 o'clock subdial for the tenths of a second measurement, and the subdial at 10 o'clock is a 30-minute chronograph accumulator. The subdials are slightly recessed into the dial, so we are not getting a flat printed cheap look here. The minute and the hour hands mimic the look of the hour indices to some degree, and both hands are filled with lume. The lume is there, but it isn't of a great quality. Well, taking into account the price point of this watch and the style, I'm kind of okay with the level of lume. Crystal. Judging by the type of the distortion we get at a very sharp viewing angle, we have a single-domed or a slightly differently double-domed crystal here. I actually like the distortion, it makes the dial somewhat more interesting. Now, something to keep in mind, we are not getting a sapphire crystal on this Swiss-made chronograph for under $100. It is a mineral crystal only, which looks like another cost-cutting measure from Swatch Group, which kind of does make sense at this price point. Now, the movement. Looks like we get a Swiss-made ETA G10-212 chronograph movement here. It is a quartz movement, which is, coincidentally, a variant of the same movement used in Moon's watch. It is not a cheap entry-level chrono either. It actually has 4 jewels, and it features tenths of a second counter and a chronograph split function. And in general, it is a reliable and robust Swiss quartz movement with a good reputation. Bracelet. Well, this watch comes on either a stainless steel bracelet or on a leather strap. Both cost about the same, and I usually would go for a bracelet. However, in this case, I liked the colorway of the black strap and the black dial combo. The leather strap is okay, it is padded closer to the case, which is nice. However, it is a bit stiff and will need a bit of a breaking in. There is no taper on the strap, so it is as wide by the clasp as it is by the case. I think absence of the taper in the strap together with a prominent signed butterfly clasp work pretty well to balance the head of this watch and generally give it a well-proportioned and well all-around look. And again, it makes this watch very much reminiscent of a Panerai style look. So, what's my final verdict? Well, my impression of this watch was somewhat different to expectations based on the product pictures. It is not a small, subtle watch by no means, so if you like watches with presence on the wrist, this one definitely has plenty of that. And also, you are definitely getting a Swiss-made quality here. Also, to address the elephant in the room again, it is branded Calvin Klein, one of the most well-known fashion brands in the world. But It is not a fashion watch built for pennies in China and sold for hundreds of dollars, not at all. This is a well-designed and quality-built timepiece that could be picked up for a very affordable price and, as such, represents a really decent value proposition. Also, I've noticed that most under 25-year-olds, also called Generation Z or Z, guys and girls don't particularly have any issues wearing Calvin Klein on their wrists. It is one of the largest fashion labels after all. What are your thoughts? Well, please do share with us in the comments, and if you find this review helpful, do hit that like button, and of course don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already done so, and as always, thank you for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.